Welcome to the Revenge Story Times channel. Some things happen in life, and in that moment they seem so ordinary. But later you realize that was the exact moment everything began. Anthony, at 61 years old, was a kind man who always took care of the people he valued. When he invited his beloved nephew Eric to stay at our home, I never could have imagined how much my life was about to change. Anthony's serious expression still lingers in my mind when he told me, "Daisy, Eric is a sensitive boy, you know. He has trouble sleeping at night. Take good care of him, okay? He needs to get himself together before starting university." But how could I have known that we'd finally get the call about the house we've been waiting for and that Anthony would leave for 3 days to check it out, leaving me alone with Eric. Eric, at 20 years old, was no longer a boy. His tall frame, broad shoulders, and mature appearance made that clear, but to Anthony, he was still just his little nephew. As for me, I had always felt a strange warmth and faint excitement around Eric, no matter how hard I tried to suppress it. There was always something about our interactions, but this time, the thought of being alone with him for 3 days both excited and unsettled me. As Anthony got into the car, he looked back at me one last time. "3 days will go by in no time," he said. But little did I know, those 3 days would completely turn my world upside down. Eric quietly walked over to me, adjusting the strap of his bag on his shoulder. When our eyes met, he gave me that same mischievous yet sincere smile he always had. "Looks like it's just the two of us now," he said, his voice relaxed, but with an undeniable depth. At that moment, I felt a strange excitement. Eric had grown up, matured, but being alone with him, this was entirely different. I couldn't have predicted what would happen that night, but one thing is certain. It was a night I will never forget. That's when it all began, and that's how our story starts. Stay tuned, because this is a tale that will truly surprise you. As the morning light filtered into the house, I was busy preparing breakfast in the kitchen. After Anthony had left, the house felt strangely quiet and peaceful. But the silence didn't last long. I heard the sound of footsteps on the stairs, signaling that Eric was awake. He appeared at the doorway wearing a casual t-shirt and with his hair slightly messy. He looked both warm and effortlessly striking. "Good morning, Daisy," he said, his voice carrying a soft tone. His eyes met mine directly, and a faint smile played on his lips. "It smells amazing in here. What are you making?" Before I could respond, he walked closer and lightly placed his hand on my waist, leaning in slightly. "Smells delicious," he added, his tone playful but genuinely warm. That unexpected touch startled me, but not in an unpleasant way. It felt strangely natural. "Just a classic breakfast," I said, trying to steady my voice to hide the tremble. "Do you want some?" "I'll eat whatever you make," he said, his eyes subtly scanning me. At that moment, it felt like he wasn't just in the kitchen. He was completely focused on me. When we sat down at the breakfast table, the space between us felt smaller somehow. Eric spoke in his usual laid-back manner, but there was a different undertone to his words this time. "You know, Daisy, you're incredibly attractive for your age," he said suddenly. His words were so direct and unexpected that I had to set my fork down on the table. "I mean, really, you're the most striking person around." "My uncle, Eric, you shouldn't say things like that," I said, laughing softly, though I could feel my face flush. "Thank you, but you're exaggerating a little." "I'm not exaggerating," he said, his eyes scanning me slowly. "If I were in my uncle's place, I wouldn't leave you alone for even a second." I was at a loss for words, desperate to change the subject. I stood up quickly and started gathering the empty plates. Eric leaned back in his chair, his gaze never leaving me. He was watching every small movement I made with an intensity that made my heart race. "We should celebrate," he said suddenly, breaking the silence. "Uncle told me you're buying the house. It would be a shame not to celebrate that." "It's not finalized yet," I replied, a small involuntary smile tugging at my lips. "But sure, we can celebrate. Let's do something tonight, just the two of us. You should dress up or something nice. We'll take pictures and send them to Uncle. We'll tell him, don't come back until you've bought the house. We've already started celebrating. What do you think, Eric? I don't want to disappoint you, but..." I hesitated, unsure. Don't hesitate, he said, cheerful but firm. You're young and still have such an incredible figure. Wear one of your old dresses from your youth. Honestly, I'm curious to see how you'd look in one. Before this story spirals even further, make sure to subscribe to my channel and turn on notifications for more. And when the story ends, don't forget to show your support through likes and comments. It means the world to me. His words completely caught me off guard. But with Eric's persistent and sincere gaze locked on me, I couldn't bring myself to say anything other than, "All right, we'll see tonight." Eric smiled. "It's going to be perfect, Daisy," he said, a gleam in his eyes that hinted at a night unlike any other. Anthony's words about looking after Eric echoed in my mind. "He's a sensitive boy, Daisy," he had said. "Take good care of him. He needs to get himself together before starting college." But Eric's behavior this morning didn't match Anthony's description of a sensitive kid. The way he was so relaxed, mischievous, and bold. His energy left me both puzzled and oddly excited. His suggestion of celebrating tonight lingered in my thoughts. At first, I found it unnecessary, but I realized I shouldn't let him down. Maybe he truly did deserve a different kind of attention. I prepared Eric's favorite dishes: chicken curry, creamy pasta, and a fresh herb salad. I added some garlic bread on the side. Once the food was ready, I went upstairs to pick out an outfit. In my wardrobe, I found a green dress I hadn't worn in years. As I slipped it on, I caught my reflection in the mirror. If this dress still fits, I must have taken good care of myself, I thought. But it does feel a bit too bold. When I went downstairs, Eric was already in the living room. He was wearing a white shirt, and I couldn't ignore the way his gaze lingered on me. "That dress looks absolutely stunning on you," he said, admiration evident in his tone. I felt my cheeks flush slightly. "Thank you, Eric. You're looking quite sharp yourself," I replied. He smiled and pulled out a chair for me to sit at the table. Our conversation at dinner was warm. Eric was witty and sincere, but the way his gaze lingered on me a little too long made me both uneasy and strangely flattered. I could feel it in the air. This wasn't going to be an ordinary evening. While sitting at the table, Eric leaned in slightly, his voice deep and intimate. "Thank you for tonight, Daisy. Everything is amazing, but I think it could be even better, even more exciting," he said, his eyes locked onto mine. There was something in his look I couldn't quite describe, a longing, a desire. His words and tone left me flustered, unsure of how to respond. I could feel the heat rising to my cheeks as I forced a nervous smile. Noticing my unease, Eric grinned, attempting to lighten the mood. "Let's call Uncle," he said suddenly, pulling out his phone. Before I could react, he was behind my chair, his hands resting lightly on my shoulders. The warmth of his touch sent a shiver through me, making my heart race. His breath close to my ear was almost tangible. When Anthony's face appeared on the screen, Eric immediately started talking, with an upbeat tone. "Uncle, we've already started celebrating," he said. He turned the camera to the table, showcasing the beautifully set meal. That's when I realized I was in the frame too, with Eric standing right behind me, his hands still on my shoulders, his face close to mine. Anthony chuckled, his voice full of delight. "So, you're saying I shouldn't come back until I've bought the house, huh?" "Exactly," Eric replied, leaning in just a little closer to me. I could feel his fingers brushing slightly against my shoulders. I wanted to step away from the camera, but I didn't want to ruin Anthony's happiness. All right, Anthony said, laughing. "I'll check out the house and head back as soon as I can. You two keep enjoying yourselves." As Eric ended the call, I let out a deep breath, though it did nothing to calm the storm of emotions swirling inside me. I thought back to Eric's previous visits, how he had always seemed a bit mischievous, yet endearing. But this time he was different. His boldness and charm were impossible to ignore, and they were stirring feelings in me I couldn't fully understand. I found myself comparing this to my marriage with Anthony. How long had it been since he'd really seen me, paid attention to me? Lately, his focus was entirely on work, leaving me feeling invisible. And now, with just a few moments of Eric's attention, I realized how deeply I missed feeling desired, seen, and alive. Lost in my thoughts, I didn't notice Eric getting up until he moved to the corner of the living room. He connected his phone to the speaker and started playing a soft, romantic song. In the dim light, I watched as he turned back to me, his expression calm yet determined. Taking a step closer, he extended his hand toward me. "Daisy, would you dance with me?" His voice was gentle, but undeniably persuasive. His request caught me off guard, and my heart pounded in my chest. "Eric, are you sure?" I asked, my voice barely more than a whisper. He smiled, his hand moving a little closer. "I'm sure. It's just a dance, Daisy. Don't you think we deserve a little fun tonight?" At that moment, all the confusion in my mind and the turmoil in my heart gave way to something entirely different. I couldn't resist Eric's outstretched hand. As I placed my hand in his, a spark ignited within me the moment his warmth touched my skin. Eric gently guided me to the center of the living room. One hand rested on my waist, while the other held mine softly. Then he switched off the lights, leaving only the flickering glow of the candles he had lit on the table. The warm light danced across the room, making the atmosphere feel almost magical. The music video playing on the TV added a rhythmic ambience, pulling us further into the moment. We began to dance. Eric's hands tightened slightly on my waist, and I could feel my heart pounding with every step. When I tilted my head to look at him, his gaze was locked on me, filled with passion and determination. That look unraveled something deep within me, shaking me to my core. As we moved together, the space between us seemed to vanish. Eric's face drew closer, his breath brushing against my skin. The physical closeness intensified the forbidden pull between us. Any resistance, I thought I had crumbled entirely in that moment. As we swayed to the music, Eric leaned down slightly, his voice a soft whisper in my ear. "I can feel the youth and desire inside you, Daisy. I see it in your eyes, that need to escape this monotonous life, even just for a moment. But you don't realize, the longing of that young woman inside you radiates through your body, keeping you forever young." His tone was gentle, yet filled with a conviction that cut through me. His words sent waves of excitement and chaos crashing through me. My heart raced, and my breaths quickened. I was trying to fight off what he was awakening inside me, but I was losing. "Eric, what are you doing to me? You're stirring up all the emotions I've tried so hard to bury, don't?" I murmured, my voice trembling and barely audible. But I couldn't deny it. I wanted to know the truth he spoke of. Eric paused for a moment, his eyes locked onto mine, studying me. "But there's a truth about you that even you don't know," he said softly, his voice steady, but laden with meaning. My eyes almost involuntarily stayed fixed on his. "What truth, Eric? Tell me," I said, my voice shaky as the unbearable tension between us reached its peak. Eric didn't look away for a second. "I like you, Daisy. I like you a lot. But the real truth is, you shouldn't keep suppressing these feelings anymore. You've shut yourself off for so long, hiding everything you feel deep inside. But it's time to stop," he said, his voice carrying a mix of passion and tenderness. His words sent a storm raging inside me. I didn't know how to respond. My lips parted slightly, but no words came out. My breath hitched, and I could only ask, "Eric, how?" My voice was quiet, almost a whisper, yet I couldn't deny the thing I was feeling any longer. In that moment, I was both terrified and desperately longing for the moment to continue. Eric stared at me for a moment in silence. Then, without warning, he moved closer. His face closed the gap between us in an instant. When his lips touched mine, it felt as though a fire had ignited within me. The kiss was filled with passion, an explosion of emotions that had been suppressed for far too long. My heart pounded so hard it felt like it might burst out of my chest, and yet, as I kissed him back, I surrendered completely, letting the flames consume me. Eric pulled his lips back for just a moment, his breathing heavy as he whispered, "Just like that, I knew you were drawn to me." His words carried such confidence that when he kissed me again, the thought of resisting didn't even cross my mind. This time, the kiss was deeper, more intense. My body instinctively leaned closer to him, my hands gripping his shoulders for balance. I was overwhelmed by his boldness and determination, but I was equally swept up in the magic of the moment. "Yes, I won't deny it anymore," I admitted, my voice barely above a whisper, but it sharpened the tension between us. "Even if it's wrong, I want to experience everything." My hands instinctively reached up to the straps of my dress, pulling them down in one swift motion. The silk dress slid off my body and pooled at my feet. I saw the surprise and admiration in Eric's eyes as he took in the sight. I responded to his stunned gaze with a faint smile and added, "Didn't you say you like things to move quickly, Eric?" Eric froze for a moment, his eyes never leaving mine. The mix of surprise and desire was written all over his face. "Daisy," he murmured, but before he could finish his sentence, his hands found their way to my waist. In that moment, we both knew there was no turning back. The pull between us was too strong to resist. Eric's hands wrapped firmly around my waist, guiding me gently toward the couch. The romantic music continued to play in the background, and the dim light made the atmosphere even more intoxicating. My heart was racing as everything began to feel surreal, but I surrendered completely to the moment. Eric slowly removed his shirt and let it drop to the floor next to my dress. At that moment, any remaining barriers between us disappeared entirely. As I lay back on the couch, Eric leaned over me, his movements deliberate but unhurried. He positioned himself carefully, his knees on either side of me, closing the distance between us completely. Our breaths intertwined, close enough to feel every exhale. My eyes locked onto his, drawn to the raw desire and determination that burned within them. His warmth and presence seeped into every part of me. When his breath brushed lightly against my neck, I shivered with anticipation. "Are you ready?" he whispered, his voice low and intense. His gaze bore into mine, filled with both longing and certainty, as though he was sealing the beginning of something that couldn't be undone. My lips parted a bit, and I tried to steady my breathing as I looked at him. My heart was pounding like crazy. My thoughts were all over the place, but I was totally sucked in by the intensity of the moment. "Yeah," I whispered, not even trying to hide the excitement in my voice. In that moment, I felt something inside me shift, and I knew that everything was going to change, and there was no going back. Eric's movements were getting faster. At that moment, I was damn sure he liked keeping things quick. Once it all started speeding up, my body just reacted on its own. My legs, which I'd practically forgotten, started trembling and tensing up, and then Eric looked at me. "I love how fast this is," he said, flashing me a grin. Then he reached out and fixed my hair. When the music ended and another track kicked in, it cranked my excitement up another notch. Eric was drenched in sweat, and so was I. It felt like I was 25 again. The more I remembered being young, the more fired up I got. Eric kept going at that quick pace, and he didn't let up. He was gentle, never rough, like he already knew exactly what I needed. Then he stopped, and we switched places. I ended up on top, looking right down at Eric's face. I started moving faster. Eric was breathing hard, and I could hear his voice trembling as he said, "I'm even more in awe of your energy right now." And then his whole body started shaking, and he finally let himself go. I reached out and grabbed his hand. "Come on," I whispered gently, "let's hit the bed." Eric got up, slow and steady, then walked with me to the bedroom. Once we stepped into that space, lit only by dim candlelight, a calm, peaceful vibe wrapped us up. We lay down together on the bed. Eric wrapped his arm around my waist and pulled me closer. I rested my head on his chest, hearing the steady thump of his heartbeat. In that moment, everything else felt so far away. All I cared about was the comfort of being right there beside him. Right before my eyes shut, I started thinking about Anthony coming back. We'd still have 2 more days of just me and Eric. The thought fired me up but also stirred all kinds of mixed feelings. Still, I didn't want to ruin the magic of this moment. I took a long breath and closed my eyes. It felt like the whole world was out there, and only this moment mattered. I'm dying to tell you about the other 2 days we spent, but right now I just want to live in this moment. You better stick around for the rest, because this story is not ending here. Stay tuned. If you've made it this far, I know my stories have hit you deep. There's so much more to share, and you definitely don't want to miss a thing. So don't forget to smash that follow button, turn on notifications, and drop a comment about this story. Goodbye.